Welcome to a podcast about something where each week we dive deep into whatever it is we find interesting. I'm your host, Calvin, and joining me locked in a pit in someone's basement, it's your co-host, Nick Richardson.
You keep telling me to put the fucking lotion on my skin. It's pissing me off.
Puts the lotion on the skin.
Get your fucking basket out of here.
It puts the lotion on the skin, or it gets the hose again.
Your dog's a little bitch dog, too.
It's a good Buffalo Bill, if I do say so myself.
That was pretty solid.
We are talking serial killers today. Factual, fictional. We're covering it all.
Hell yeah. Movies, TV, real life, the extraordinary, the unextraordinary.
How we would be serial killers if we became one.
I don't know about all that. I can't reveal my secrets.
That wasn't on your outline? Shit.
It's very patented information.
Yeah, I didn't plan that out either. Don't worry about that.
I think everyone has a backup plan. That's what I'm going to leave it at that.
All right, yeah, we are trying to cover it all, but let's start with the basic. What makes a serial killer?
See, I mean, I think you got to start with the definition, and that's it's a person who commits a series of murders, often with no apparent motive, and typically following a characteristic, predictable behavior pattern. And that's a good definition. It's solid. It's a good parentheses to work within. And it's also typically someone who murders 3 or more people. Because I
had 3 or more.
Yeah, I was very concerned about what does serial mean exactly?
And then what's the differentiation between serial and mass murderer and spree murderer? Because those are all 3 different things apparently.
Well, and I think they all kind of overlap too at the same time.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because I mean, I've seen some of the mass shooters in the past several years referred to as serial killers, and technically they are serial killers. They just do it all at once. Yeah, which is kind of fucked up, but they're a fucked up bunch of people. But yeah. I think
for me it was definitely the multiple kills and 3 or more is the baseline, it appears to be. And the biggest thing in my mind that's always stuck is there's usually a pattern. And that's the most important part to differentiate between mass murder or spree murderer, because I think when you just kill a bunch of people randomly, that's your mass murder. When you kill a bunch of people in a row, you're a spree murderer, right? Like the sniper, the DC sniper.
Yeah.
10, 15 years back, he was like a spree murderer. He just stood up there and picked people off, but he didn't give a shit who he was killing. For a serial killer, they might not know the victims, but they're killing them for a reason.
Often they don't.
Right. Well, not yet. They think they do.
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes.
So the Wikipedia definition had added this bit that it's usually in service of abnormal psychological gratification. There's some compulsion within them that satiates something in their brain. And that's why they have to keep killing. And it says the murders take place over more than a month and include a significant period of time between them.
Yeah. I
so
mean,
it's kind of this drawn out thing rather than a mass murder or a spree killer where that's all rather quickly usually.
Well, yeah, and it makes it even more frightening because it takes another level of thought to not get caught, plan that shit out. It's very unnerving. Very unnerving. Sorry, go ahead. I was going to say, even though, when faced with real life serial killers and TV serial killers, they, I don't know, they don't reflect upon each other very well. So it's kind of something where I'm just I have a caricature in my mind almost built up. It's getting odd.
Right, and real life serial killers often don't live up to what TV, movie, fictionalized versions of serial killers kind of do. And just more from Wikipedia, the psychological gratification is usual motive for serial killing. Most serial killings involve sexual contact with the victim. The FBI states that motives of serial killers can include anger, thrill-seeking, financial gain, and attention-seeking. The murders may be attempted or completed in a similar fashion. That's the pattern I was kind of talking about. The victims may have something in common, demographic profile, appearance, gender, race. And a serial killer is neither a mass murderer or a spree killer, although there may be conceptual overlaps between serial killers and spree killers. And then here's the last interesting thing I found from Wikipedia. 76% of all known serial killers in the 20th century were from the United States.
Yeah, and
good job. We're number one.
90% of that number is white people. White men.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
That's not sourced anywhere, but I would be hard pressed to disagree with you.
Yeah. I'm gonna leave it at that.
And yeah, just it's strange that there's this compulsion and they get that gratification and they just it's often a sense of they just can't help themselves. And that's one of the things that I think TV and movies do a good job of portraying. There's other things that come in there that they kind of go off the rails with, but they always kind of go back to that. There's this compulsion that they're not doing it for themselves. There's this tick in their brain that's telling them they have to do it.
I mean, what a fucked up roll of the dice.
They can't actually stop themselves. They don't necessarily want to kill. They know it's wrong in some cases, and they just can't not do it.
Well, it's like, alcoholics who can't just not drink. It's
right.
something that's just a fucked up roll in the dice, in my opinion, that they got stuck. Like, I really like food. Sometimes I can't resist that cupcake in front of me. I'm going to fucking eat it. Luckily, I don't want to kill people. So, I mean, that's kind of up in the air, universe dictating some random bullshit, but it's very plausible and realistic to look at it from that point of view, in my opinion. I agree with you there.
So, do you have any information on the first serial killers, where the kind of the name sprouted up? What did you find in your research about kind of how this all started?
I latched on to two characters.
Okay.
I did a bunch of research, and no one really I didn't gravitate to anyone quite like I did these two, because they both have a very specific reasoning behind it. Or not specific reasoning, but they were very popular, almost.
Okay.
They've been the most sensationalized, and that's Liu Pengley.
Oh yeah, I saw him.
Yep,
Chinese
Prince of Zhidong from 144 to 116 BC. I went with him because he did it under his own volition instead of being involved with like a conspiracy or something, and he just murdered a shitload of people, which it sounds like he just kind of enjoyed it. And he's one of the first on record. Like, I think there was one person before him, but it didn't sound very verifiable.
Yeah,
to me.
the only thing that I found like before him was that kind of the mythology around like werewolves and vampires. Some believe that stems from medieval type serial killers before this time period. But there's not really any good documentation to back that up. But they would just, people would describe these weird ritualistic deaths, and I think they often got attributed to these fantastical beasts instead of, just some fucking crazy guy. And there's no, going back before 150 BC, there's no documentation like that you can trust on anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's Chinese. The ancient Chinese were amazing at keeping records. So
yes,
that was something I trusted. Yeah, that's why they've been around forever.
Well,
so that's
in Liu Pengley. He would apparently go out on these expeditions with 20 to 30 slaves or just other people and just murdering the shit out of people and taking their stuff from them.
Yeah, pretty much. He got loaded, and then, he would just kill his own men and very shit brutal. Like that. Yeah. Well, just make them jump off cliff faces. Yep. Obviously hacking them to death with a sword and shit like that. That would suck. Dude, that would suck.
He supposedly killed over 100 people, and there didn't seem to be like much of a pattern, or I guess maybe there was a compulsion to do it, but it all seemed very random. So I didn't know, like, really, does it count with the definition we just laid out? Does it count as serial killing, or was he just kind of a crazy dude?
Well, I think it goes. That's kind of hand in hand, isn't it?
That's
got to be a little crazy to be a serial killer. But I think it's an anger type thing, because I imagine that time period in China, a lot of proud people walking around. And if you're a prince, especially, if someone disrespects you in the slightest, I could totally see this guy just being someone in power that kills because he's upset. Like, that ticks him off in his brain, so he goes after it. And I'm really curious what they considered to be people back then. Because, I mean, there's slavery in that time.
True.
Like, did he murder 5,000 slaves? And that just doesn't count as a statistic.
Fuck
and
those
100,
guys.
like, serving people. Exactly. I mean, the U.S. military doesn't count casualties or civilian casualties. So I could totally see it being feasible that ancient China didn't count slaves or house people or stuff like that. People on the staff. So yeah, fuck that guy. He's probably crazy as shit, and we're just getting this trickle down, watered down little bitch, in the future.
Yeah, I agree.
Boom. And my second, was the first American serial killer, H.H. Holmes from Chicago. Most people know about the murder house at the 1893 World's Fair. He lured people and did some super eerie shit to them, and, I mean, he basically was just a fake from the moment he was conscious of himself. Like, this dude ran every kind of scheme you could think of, and, he was put to death at a young age after being found responsible for killing a bunch of people, and he did it because he was evil. He knew he was evil, and, I mean, that was just something he wanted to do. That's what freaked me out about this dude so much, is that he just enjoyed it for the hell of it.
It's one thing when there's a compulsion and like they can't help themselves and they're almost apologetic for it. And there's another one they're just like, nah, I want to fucking kill people.
Yeah, I enjoy it. Like Richard Ramirez.
I'm here for that. Let's get it.
That's what I'm on this earth for.
If you had the compulsion, wouldn't that be the attitude you want to take towards it?
Well,
if you had that voice in the back of your head saying you got to kill somebody today, I mean, you'd have to try and find joy in it, I would think.
I mean,
you don't want to be miserable with your life's calling. Is what I'm saying.
Looking in the mirror, like, okay, we're gonna do this. We're gonna like it. It's gonna be tight. Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to make light of murder and shit like that, but you'd think there'd be some kind of enjoyment out of it, but
well, like they said, like the Wikipedia definition is like you get this psychological gratification, but that doesn't necessarily mean enjoyment. That just means whatever that tick is in the back of your mind, that gets satisfied for the moment, and then it flares back up.
That itch gets satisfied, and it's like, okay, for a second.
I had two other guys that were a bit earlier than that. The first was Gilles de Rais, 15th century Europe. Sounds like a French name. He sexually assaulted and killed peasant children, between 140 and 800 kids.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I think we discussed it a little earlier before we got on air, but it's like a lot of this shit involved kids. That's what made it so bad.
Yeah, I didn't go too deep into it for that reason. And then the first modern serial killer, everyone knows him, your friend, Jack the Ripper.
Very fascinated by Jack the Ripper.
So he was stalking around London, 1888. He killed at least 5 women, most likely more. But his investigation, I guess, that led to the invention of many different investigation techniques that are still used today. They were doing house-to-house inquiries. They were collecting forensic materials and trying to trace it as best they could.
Curfews.
They were doing character profiling, and it set off this worldwide media frenzy, which obviously is still going on today. Anytime there's one murder, people are usually all over it, especially if it's a rich white dude.
For like 5 minutes, and then it fades because of the news cycle. But shit, man, imagine just how powerful that information had to be to travel that far to like reach it in the United States at that time, when the United States was still kind of a fucked up place to be. That is, and the dude never got caught. I mean, I think I saw some shit a couple months ago where they were talking about they found his descendant or something. Or found some DNA that they could test, and they determined it was like a doctor or something in the town.
Some random ass dude doing a 23andMe test, all of a sudden learns he's Jack the Ripper's great grandson.
And then proceeds to tell everybody at every fucking party he goes to from that, hey, did you know I was Jack the Ripper's grandson?
And no women will talk to him now.
Yeah. He's like, isn't that super cool just to be like a piece of history in front of you? And they're just like,
Yeah,
why don't you
that's not the history I want, dude.
Why don't you jack the fuck off and, get ripped by someone else, bitch. That is something my wife would say to some douchebag if he said that. I could see it.
Get it.
Funny. She's serious, man. She doesn't play.
All right, so let's move out of the real world for a little bit. We'll come back to the real world, but let's talk fiction.
Yes.
Let's.
This is where we thrive.
Yeah. Yeah, we're good at fiction. We're good at real life, but we like fiction more, I think.
I mean, that's what you come here for, isn't it, listeners?
So let's start with, are depictions within TV and movies accurate, and why or why not? I think the idea behind TV and movie serial killers are usually mostly accurate. Like, they're trying to be accurate. They're trying to show that it's this compulsion, that they can't help themselves, or that there's something else going on. And they usually do a good job of building groundwork for what that compulsion is and how the killing satisfies them. But the execution, pun intended, is often taken too far in some direction. Like, it happens especially in TV shows, but it can happen in movies too. They'll either like muddle around with their initial compulsion to like mix something else in there to try and make it more compelling, or they'll add in a bunch of different disconnected mental health tics, or they have them go like just completely off the rails at some point, or sometimes they get cured in some weird way. And the absolute worst is when they make the serial killer into some sort of superhero in an otherwise grounded setting.
Definitely.
To me, the compulsion for serial killing is compelling enough on its own. I don't know that they need to add in a bunch of stuff on top of it.
Like morality bullshit.
Morality bullshit, or like let's mix in, let's muddy the waters with mental health issues, or like clearly a person who becomes a serial killer has mental health issues, but they often like trying to add 15 mental health issues instead of just a couple that are easy to understand and easy to see how that leads to it.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Like they don't need their general psychosis, which leads them to serial killing, and OCD on top of that. And let's throw in a little bit of anxiety, and let's just throw a bunch of shit on top of whatever it is that actually leads to serial killers.
And for good measure, they're gay too.
Yes,
that's usually. Yep. I mean, they always do that shit, and it's like
they're gay,
really?
Or some have some sexual trauma in their past that leads them down this road, or they're cross-dresser, or it's always something else on top of it.
Yeah, they take shit a little bit too far. So I'd say I'm split kind of 50-50. Like, I agree with basically everything you said, but I'm kind of more in the middle, because I think a lot of what they propose is possible, but the execution of it is fucking awful.
Yeah.
Like, if you ever seen Bates Motel,
I have not.
Recent, they do a very good depiction of Norman Bates' separation from reality. It's very well acted, and it's gradual instead of.
But then
just
he's also having a sexual relationship with his mother, and he's also gay.
Yeah, is he?
I don't know. Probably.
I don't fucking remember. But yeah. Okay, sorry. I took you way too seriously right there. But yeah, I mean, I think when you have like in Hannibal, the recent show with Mads Mikkelsen, where you have like the super suave, sexy serial killer that can manipulate everyone and everything in their lives and is kind of super brazen about it, I think that is just kind of utter bullshit. Like same thing along
that's
with
kind of going
like,
into the let's make him a superhero. Like, he's able to get away with absolutely anything because he's just that good. And like Hannibal's one that I don't know that myth needed to be built on. Like, we've got 4 movies about it already. Do we really need to go back and like really fill in the gaps? Because that's where you're going to start to see you got to add extra shit to it to continue to make it compelling, because there's nothing more compelling than what he is in Silence of the Lambs.
Oh, I agree. And I mean, Anthony Hopkins fucking killed it.
That helps too.
But I think what they did was literally put a bunch of phrases on a dartboard, and they're like, okay, what do we want Mads Mikkelsen to do? Boom, serial killer. Okay, he could play. Who needs an update? Hannibal. And that's kind of how they rolled with it, and just that shit was out there, man. I stopped watching it because it was just like, fucking really.
Yeah, we only watched like the first 2 episodes, and then we gave up real quick.
I think my wife and I watched the first season, and then it was just like, okay, this is just too. It's like watching National Treasure, but with murderers who eat people.
Well, and that's the other thing that they do in serial killer TV shows is they make the crimes more and more outlandish. Like, it's not enough just to have this compelling storyline of a cat and mouse between detective and killer. Lets up the ante on every subsequent kill. And then they get to the end of the season, they're like, okay, now we got to go bigger next season. And you could tell really early on in Hannibal that that's how that show was going to go.
They followed the Dexter model.
Yes. We'll talk about Dexter.
Oh, fuck yeah.
Let's go to Twitter real quick before we jump into some of our favorite depictions of serial killers in TV. On Twitter, at APA something, we put up a poll this week, a resounding defeat for everybody in this poll. So we're digging into the minds of serial killers this week, and we want to know who is the most compelling TV serial killer. The first option was the Carver from Nip Tuck, 6.2%. Dexter Morgan from Dexter, 75.4% gets the vote there. Red John from The Mentalist, which he was just like, I just looked up a list of serial killers on TV. I've never seen The Mentalist. I don't know who he is. He got 7.7%, which I can't believe he got any votes. Do people watch The Mentalist?
Never really. I've heard of it.
Mentalist heads, get at us.
Yeah. Let us know why it's tight.
Yeah. Other, leave a comment, 10.8%, and then we just got a whole bunch of comments for Hannibal because
every single one, I think.
Purposely left Hannibal off the list because Hannibal is a movie serial killer. Like, yes, he had a TV show, but the perfect version is in a movie. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I think we got to give shout outs to those people.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to. So let's start with Firestarters Podcast at Firestarters Pod. Hi, I'm also commenting for Team Hannibal. That man lost his eye while crossing a goddamn mountain with elephants. Okay.
See right there.
Yeah.
Fucking crazy banana.
What do all those words mean, and why are they in a show about a serial killer who eats people's brains and eventually gets caught?
No, I get it. That he's talking about Hannibal from ancient Carthage.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. I get you, Fireside Pod.
Whew.
Firestarters Pod. I'm sorry.
All right.
I like you.
I was really hard on the Hannibal TV show for a second there.
Oh, we'll get a little harder.
Oh, yeah. But It Was Aliens Podcast at But It Was Aliens. Leaving out Hannibal is a little rude. Again, he is a movie serial killer. Bedknobs and Broomflicks at Broomflicks agreed with But It Was Always Aliens Podcast. Cinema Joe's Podcast at Cinema Joe's. I think you forgot someone with a gif of Hannibal again. Joseph Mason at Lord Nishar. Another gif of Hannibal, this time cooking. Probably
that steak looks fire. That person looks fire, I mean.
Yeah. Looks.
The gif of that person looks fire.
I'm kind of hungry now.
Yeah.
Not bad.
It's starving.
Michael Vincent Boulay at Michael V. Boulay gives a comment of Dexter Morgan was his vote, which you and everybody else, dude.
Yeah. Yeah, you and everybody else. But I imagine he probably voted for the poll too. So thanks for being thorough.
Thank you everyone for participating. That's at APA something every week. We try and put up a poll. Sometimes, we don't have a good poll, but most of the time we put up a poll. Also, you can follow Nick at @alone_podcast on Twitter.
Yeah, it's dope.
Participate. Talk to us.
We love it.
All right, let's talk about some of our favorite performances. For me, I like the serial killer arc more than I like an entire show built on a serial killer. When you build an entire show, the killer just has to keep escaping justice in crazier and crazier ways just to kind of keep the show going, and it gets harder and harder to believe the more the show goes.
Oh,
and it's like, all right, this guy just killed 50 people. and then stuck around to like carve them up in a specific way. Like you're gonna fucking catch that guy. I'm sorry.
I know exactly what you're talking about. We gotta say it out loud, bro. We just gotta say it.
Go for it.
Dexter. Talking about Dexter.
Yeah, so I didn't watch Dexter. Dexter was the last one I had on my list just because I don't watch the show, but let's start with Dexter.
Well, as most notable performance?
Well, just like let's just talk about Dexter for a minute.
Okay, we gotta get Dexter out of the way.
Yeah.
The first 2 seasons of that show are brilliant because of the premise. But
he kills
that
bad
show
people,
is
right?
Oh yeah, he has to kill.
He's a doctor.
He feels no emotions. No, he's a blood spatter
Oh yeah, that's right. Blood
analyst.
spatter analysis.
But he works for a major police department around a bunch of detectives, and dude is a robot basically who, you know, kills high profile like drug dealers and child peddlers and shit like that. Like you root for him for sure. Like that's kind of the thing about Dexter that was so tight. I used to watch that every Sunday with my parents. Like that was like a thing we did. And eventually it just kind of got into the realm of the unfeasible and just the asinine, especially after he killed a detective, like basically blew him up, who was, you know, spouting all kinds of bullshit that he was the bad guy anyway. So it's just, it became so unbelievable, and it was just a caricature, but it was also kind of fucking tight.
I tried to pick it up like right around when season 2 was starting. And I watched a couple episodes of season 1, and it just didn't grab me. Like, I didn't really care about him. I didn't care about what was going on. Like, I started from the beginning, right before season 2 started. I had Showtime for free. I was like, all right, I'll pick this up. Everybody says it's good. I just didn't fucking care about it. And it turns out I was right. Everybody ended up not caring about him.
Exactly. It was kind of like Game of Thrones after season 8. But
I didn't watch it, but like I know from the talk around it that it just went too far. Like you were just saying, Dexter's killings went too far. The storylines got too out of hand, and it's just hard to keep a serial killer interesting for 7 seasons without making him do crazier and crazy things and get away with it. Like at some point he can't get away with it anymore.
Exactly. Serial killers are not fucking heroes. And that's where they fucked up. Like the first 2 seasons, he was not a hero. He was just this guy that had an obvious ulterior motive that, you know, it was clear to everyone that it was justified in his mind. So it was like, okay, I'll go along with it. But after that, it became just like, he's killing the bad guy, so he's a good guy and shit like that.
Right.
I don't know. It was really
even
unfeasible.
If you take someone like Walter White, which Breaking Bad went for 5 seasons, and it didn't ever get to the point where it was so outlandish, and they did a good job of taking those 5 seasons and making it, okay, this is only an 18-month period here that we're looking at this guy's life. So they couldn't actually take it that far. With Dexter, it was 7 seasons. It was supposed to represent 7 or more years of this guy's life. So he had to keep progressing. Whereas Walter White never really even had an opportunity to progress. Like he raised in the meth world, but he could only get so far with, you know, his looming cancer and all that other stuff. So that might be maybe a way to look at something like this in the future of like, let's not make them get crazier and crazier. Let's compress the time until they're eventually caught, but up the stakes of that cat and mouse game. Serial killer is only as good as his detective too.
100%.
Like, there's a reason that Clarice Starling is an amazing character.
Yeah, and Hannibal doesn't fucking kill her.
Right.
You can't kill the detective because it's like...
And part of the reason Hannibal's great is because Clarice is also great.
Oh, 100%.
So one I wanted to talk about that I remember vividly is the Carver from Nip Tuck.
I was never down with that show, man. No. My parents fucking loved it. I remember my dad went out and bought like he went out, you know, this was back in the day when DVDs were all the rage at Best Buy, and spent like $45 a season. I think he got 3 or 4. I don't know how many they made, but I remember he came back with big old bag, sat down, watched all of it. Shut the fuck up about it.
6 seasons. And so, yeah, I watched this show during college with friends, like, so it was kind of just a fun thing that we did, and we made fun of it a lot. I'm not a huge fan of Ryan Murphy shows. Ryan Murphy's responsible for Nip Tuck, Glee, American Horror Story. I want to say maybe like that Scream TV show they tried to do, or Scream Queens, and The Politician that they just did on Netflix. Everything that he does, like, they go super over the top on everything and become mostly unrealistic right off the bat. But again, this was a show that I just watched with my friends, and it was kind of this fun thing to watch while we drank and did other things, you know. So the Carver makes its first appearance in season 2, and he's not necessarily a serial killer, but a serial mutilator would be the best way to put it. And then he ran rampant through season 3. And let me just run down the facts here, and you'll see how shows can take this stuff too far. raped and disfigured nearly 24 victims. He mostly targeted people who had plastic surgery, and that plastic surgery was mostly provided by the main characters of the show, Sean McNamara and Christian Troy. I'm with you there. Good premise for your serial mutilator there, right there. That's good, right?
Yeah, you got the framing.
Yeah. His motive was to make beautiful people horribly scarred, calling beauty, quote, a curse on the world that keeps people from seeing who the real monsters are. Still all good.
Yeah, that's a bit incel.
Yeah,
that sounds incel as fuck already.
Yeah. But again, this guy kind of is supposed to be. Like, that's why he's going around killing people.
Yeah,
I can still, that mindset all fits together still, right?
Yeah, you're right.
When the reveal comes, it is revealed that it's a rival plastic surgeon.
Oh my God.
And his sister, who's horribly disfigured. And so just to go a little further in this and go into the Ryan Murphy-ness of it, in the reveal of the killers, we realize the sister is disfigured at birth, possibly from incest because their parents were brother and sister.
Oh
and
my God.
the brother, the rival plastic surgeon, he had no genitalia. Again, also maybe a result of the incest. And he became a plastic surgeon just to try and fix his sister, but he could never actually fix her, so then they started fucking just cutting the shit out of people.
They have scalpel fights too? God damn,
like,
that sounds dumb.
I think they did at one point. Like, I think he's like hiding in the corner trying to get away from somebody, and so that was like, it just had to keep adding more shit on top of it rather than just like, okay, he's a rival plastic surgeon, wants to cure the curse on the world of people's beauty, so he starts, going after these. That's enough. We don't need all that backstory of, all that other crap on top of it. But I will say, this was one of the first time I was truly scared by something I saw on a TV show. Like, I was scared the Carver was going to come get me and could be lurking in any corner. I didn't have plastic surgery or anything, but like they did a good job of setting up the tension behind the Carver's attacks.
Well, that takes away from it when they just hit you with that outlandish bullshit. It's
right.
Like, fucking okay. It was like Prison Break. Prison Break was great until they started doing crazy Banana Land bullshit.
And most of that reveal comes in the last 2 episodes of the Carver arc, and then they end up getting away and like moving to Spain and continuing their reign of terror or some shit.
Fucking course.
And it's like any one of those details would have been enough for any normal show, but Ryan Murphy has to crank everything up to 15. He goes past 11. He goes straight to 15. And it's like it was really compelling to watch the serial killer arc. And then when they throw all that bullshit at you at the end of like who he is and why he's doing it, or why they're doing it, I suppose, it's like, okay, now it's just a joke.
Yeah, they're trying to humanize it, and it's like, get out of fucking town, you suck.
Yeah. Did you have any serial killers from TV that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I'm a punk bitch. I'm gonna say Mads Mikkelsen. He was amazing in fucking Hannibal. Amazing.
All right.
He played a great character, but at the same time he was another flavor of Anthony Hopkins. Anthony Hopkins is pepper, but Mads Mikkelsen was lemon pepper, which both are very good on chicken. You know what I mean?
Great
that analogy was a little out there, but he did a great job. I remember the first season distinctly, and then after that it was just like, man, this is just fucking dumb, and he's not that good. Like, he can't, and I don't think Anthony Hopkins could rein it in either if they went to the crazy lengths that the Hannibal TV show did.
That's the problem. The problem is never the performance. It's always like, okay, how are we going to keep this show going? What is going to keep viewers interested? Let's add more shit on top of this.
No, it just needs to be brilliant, and it will have a following.
Let's talk about that for a second then, because I've got one last one that does that perfectly.
Hit me.
True Detective Season 1, Errol Childress. First season of True Detective, so good.
So
just a little background on the serial killings. His calling card was to abduct women and children, torture, rape, murder, and display their bodies in ritualistic poses. He was part of the Tuttle cult, and he was a groundskeeper at the Tuttle's Light of the Way Academy. The detectives had encountered him on their first go-round, but didn't have enough evidence to convict him, came back around to him 20 years later when they're reopening the case. True Detective did a great job of not putting too much on the serial killer.
Oh my god, yeah.
And a big part of that is because it's a show about the detectives, not the killer. But also, like, it was like, we're going to fit everything into 10 episodes. So we don't have time, like Hannibal, what's 22 episodes a season for, 4 seasons?
Something like that, yeah.
So that's 88 episodes that we have to fill with backstory for this character who never had a backstory. Like, he had little bits of backstory that they peppered in through the movies, and now they've got to fill all this in.
Which just makes it weaker with
Right,
backstory.
absolutely. It's the same thing with Michael Myers, like the Rob Zombie Michael Myers movies, when they came out and he put all this backstory on top of Michael Myers, like, he's not as scary anymore because he's like this shitty kid who just wants to watch the world burn. It was so much scarier Michael Myers in the original Halloween when he just showed up and was staring at you from across the street. He didn't talk. You had no idea why he was killing anyone. Like, that was a much more compelling villain than what Rob Zombie did when he came back. With the Rob Zombie movies are still pretty good.
Dude, 100% I agree with you.
But there's those type of stories where you don't give too much to the killer can be very, very compelling. And when you give too much information on the killer, it weakens them often.
Oh, yeah, I agree 100%. I think in every case it does.
Loki. The more you give Loki to do, the better he becomes.
He's not a serial killer. He's a mass murderer.
Well, that's true. I was just kind of thinking
Calvin.
villains. In True Detective, the killer was only the killer. And he just more or less had his compulsion, very simple compulsion, killing in the name of this cult. They didn't add all this stuff onto him. He seemed like maybe he wasn't all there, but we never know for sure if that's what's going on or what's really going on with him. We know he's killing for the cult. You never felt any danger from the killer. It was more compelling for us to kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together along with the detectives.
Right? It was like playing an eerie ass card game.
Right.
Like a party card game, in my opinion. Which is dumb. That's a dumb analogy.
I kind of like the stories that focus on the detectives more than the killer. Like Silence of the Lambs is good because it takes time to focus on Clarice as well as Hannibal. Because mostly it avoids all the traps that we've been talking about. And two, the capturing of the killer is a more compelling way to tell a story than the actual killing is. We don't see Buffalo Bill or Hannibal. I mean, I guess we see Hannibal kill a couple guys, but the investigation is not into him. He's just killing people because they let him, basically.
Well, I mean, that's not the sole focus
right,
of the
that's not
film.
the focus of the story. It's not important how he's killing people. It's important that he has killed people, both Hannibal and Buffalo Bill. It's important that they've killed people and that we need to find them to stop them.
Exactly.
Let's move into movies.
Movies. This is where I think TV gets way fucking outlandish. Most movies kind of keep it in the realms of reality. I think
they try and keep it tight. Yeah.
They keep it.
There are some that go over the top, but kind of the point of them is to. I've got one on my list that we can talk about that kind of goes that way. It's just sometimes they're really interesting, but it's hard to watch these and kind of put yourself in that mind space for 2 hours. Like, it's hard to watch a movie like Zodiac, even though it's really good.
It's kind of it's not sensationalized, so it's like it's just a story, but on a big screen. So it's it's not thrilling, it's not yada yada. So I think it requires a little pre-interest in it before you kind of go into it, unlike a lot of TV shows where it just sensationalizes everything.
Right. And they build and build and build, and movie serial killers, like, a lot of times they're more compelling, which is why I count Hannibal as a movie serial killer and not a TV serial killer, because I'd much rather watch Anthony Hopkins' version than Mads Mikkelsen, even though, like you said, Mads Mikkelsen does a great job. They just don't have time to muck up the works with all this ancillary crap that we've been talking about for the past 30 minutes that TV shows do.
Yeah. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Sometimes they get off in there, but they just don't have time to do it. They don't have time to build all of that out because they can just take that singular focus on the compulsion, because they also need to give the detectives and victims screen time, and they're not trying to fill 22 episodes.
And no one's going to sit through a 3-hour serial killer movie either.
No.
So, I mean, if Hannibal was 3 fucking hours, I think it was like 2 hours, 15 minutes.
Yeah, if that.
I think that's like literally the maximum it could possibly be.
Yeah. And it gives enough time to detectives, you get enough time for victims, but in a TV show, it has to take all of that, and you've got like 3 hours on just the detectives, you've got 3 hours on just the victims, you've got 10 hours on just the killer doing killer stuff. And it's just too much. We don't need that much of everything.
Agreed.
I'm thinking, as I was going through this, we're probably going to have to do a serial killer movie superlatives at some point in the future.
I'm hella down.
So let's not get too deep into it here.
I'll be quick and easy.
Who do you got?
I got Christian Bale as in American Psycho.
Patrick Bateman. I've got him on my list. Does he count as a serial killer?
I think so. He
Lay
kills people.
He kills people.
Give me the fucking facts. Well, yeah. I mean, he kills several people. He kills his business associate. He kills that chick.
But does he?
Yes.
Does he actually? We don't know.
That's a very good point, you bastard.
No, that's not the
bastard.
point I'm making. he definitely had the compulsion to kill, maybe, if he's killing, and he gained some sort of gratification out of it, we think. But it also seemed really random of the people he picked to kill, of the times he picked to kill. And like you said, it's a good movie, and I'm glad you brought it up because I wanted to. Like, I just wanted to talk about it. Because we don't actually know if he's killing anyone.
We don't know, but I think each time he does kill, let's
just assume for the rest of this conversation that he's killing people.
Yeah, let's just assume. So I think it's at the utmost peak of what he could actually resist from his urges. Like when he kills Jared Leto or appears to kill Jared Leto. No shit. Fuck that guy. He is just so sick of this dude. So I don't know.
We all are.
I can't stand him. He looks like Jesus, and he just needs to chill the fuck out.
And his kills would be so methodic, disposing of them would be so methodic, leave no trace, to the point where we don't actually know if he's killing anyone. The rest of the movie just kind of leaves open to interpretation that reliability of the narrator. Like, is he doing the things that we think he's doing? Does he know what's going on? Do we know what's going on? Because he doesn't know what's going on, is Patrick Bateman even his real name? Like, it brings up all these questions. And like there's just, to me, it's almost a story of just this yuppie who has a psychotic break, than someone who has had this yearning to methodically kill people for some sort of psychological gratification. Like, I think he's just broken, rather than this is something that's been with him his whole life.
I agree to a certain extent. I just think it's too seamless.
Yeah.
Like his.
Oh, it definitely is.
I mean, it's way too seamless. Like even in like Fight Club, for example, shit didn't make sense at relatively some point, and I think it was just too seamless in that. I think he killed people. I'm gonna go with that. I had a second one.
Okay.
But and that's Kevin Spacey in Seven. Little bit out there with the whole Seven Deadly Sins.
He definitely had a pattern and a compulsion.
But yeah, I think that's most notable, especially because he got the detective to kill him in the end.
Yes.
Boom. What's in the black?
Got a newly recruited serial killer. Way to go.
And it can be serial, unless he murdered people in prison.
Because
he's going to prison. Actually, he's probably not going to prison. He probably got fucking let off and got paid leave for like 6 months. Man. Yeah, no shit. I mean, I would. Whoever would prosecute that guy would.
There's no way Brad Pitt went to jail. Let us know on Twitter at AP something at alone_podcast. Did Brad Pitt in Seven go to jail?
100%. I will send you $5.
There you go. I had 2.5 more I want to talk about.
Hit me.
First, Eileen Wuornos from Monster. Have you seen that with Charlize Theron?
I have not, but that was one of my mother's favorite movies of all time.
You should watch it before we do serial killer movie superlatives.
Sounds fair.
We don't know when that's going to happen, so you got time. But it's one of the best tales of a serial killer out there, and it's kind of the same way as Zodiac. It's based on a true story, so we don't get too far into any of those traps that TV falls into. They couldn't ever take this movie too far in any of those directions because Eileen Wuornos is a real person. They speculate on some things, but ultimately they tried to make it as grounded as possible. And Monster attempts to humanize the killer and show her struggle, which Charlize Theron transforms into just this truly intimidating force, which is crazy when you think about who Charlize Theron is.
She's intimidating as fuck.
Well,
she's just not sexy intimidating in this.
Yeah.
She's
a beast. Yeah.
Fucking monster.
And it's also about her last days avoiding capture and kind of gives us a glimpse into her lifestyle, knowing that she's kind of being looked for and she still can't control these urges. She still has to keep killing even though she's literally on the run, trying to get away. She goes and puts herself back in this position where she's going to get caught and captured. I think it's like that's the important part to get in these movies. Fictionalized movies often show the killer in complete control of their compulsions and these urges. Like you said, Patrick Bateman, Hannibal Lecter seems in control. And like some other stupid thing is the thing that gets them caught. You know, it's never the actual killing. It's that they decided to dump the body in a different place this time. So that's how they got caught. Or they just don't get caught in the case of American Psycho, you know?
It's menial as fuck. Like, right. Oh my god, he just happened to have the one security guard patrolling the lake.
Right,
find him while he's dumping the body.
But in real life, a lot of these people, you know, they know that the heat is on and they just can't stop themselves. Like, they know they should stop, but they just can't. And that's how they get caught, because they just can't help it anymore. Whereas in movies and TV shows, they can't help it, but they still are in control of it enough where they do it smartly every single time, and it's some other stupid shit that gets them caught.
Yeah, pretty much.
This one's a little off the rails for you. Ghostface from Scream.
Ooh.
Definitely
That's
counts.
Multiple people.
Yeah, but they've had the same goal, I think, and the same compulsion and urges. I think it's kind of weird when horror movies are deemed serial killers, because there's often that outlandishness inherent with a horror movie, especially one like Scream.
Definitely.
You know, Saw and Halloween are other good examples that you could put up there as horror movie serial killers.
The movie's called Saw. You just imagine it's probably
movie. you could probably count Friday the 13th in there, but he's like a legitimate superhero. Supervillain, I guess you would say.
He's supernatural.
Right, and Scream definitely falls into all of the traps that we mentioned in the TV section, but it has awareness of it, and it's mostly on purpose that they're doing it. And I kind of wanted to talk about one horror serial killer, and this one seemed like the most fun. It seemed more fun to talk about that than Saw or Halloween. When you think about it, it's really a good reflection of the issues with compulsion that I was kind of talking about in Monster. Of these guys, they can't help themselves. They just keep killing more and more people, and they have to somehow tie that killing to scary movie tropes. You know, they know what they're doing is wrong. They know that they can't keep getting away with it, and they just are making it easier for them to get caught as the movie goes on, but they have to keep going. They have to finish the movie.
When they keep changing their plan, you know,
right.
They keep trying to adapt to the situation that's unadaptable.
Right. And so that kind of like speaks to that itch of like, well, I'm really going over this lady and her family, but this other thing's connected now, and this other thing's connected now. So now I have to go after those things too. And it shows kind of this tree branching of their compulsion, which I thought was kind of cool. A little bit cooler than Halloween, which is more random until you get to Halloween 2, where it turns out she's a sister, and that's why blah, blah, blah. And Saw is more meticulous and well thought out.
Definitely. I mean, I like your pick of Scream, because that's really compelling when you think about it, because it's like lying. You know, you're lying to cover lies, to cover lies, to cover lies, to cover lies, and eventually that shit will all come crashing down. You know it will, but people keep doing it anyway. So I think I like that. I like that a lot.
Okay, and then just real quick on Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal Lecter, Buffalo Bill. I don't think you can talk about serial killers in movies without a little bit on Silence of the Lambs, which we've done a little bit when we talked about Hannibal before. I think we get both sides of the problems and the good things that we've pointed out with other serial killer tales with Silence of the Lambs, because we get some of the fantastical side of things happening with Hannibal, and then we get the more realistic picture of the serial killer with Buffalo Bill. He just has to keep kidnapping women to complete his skin suit, right? That's what he's doing with them?
Yeah.
I think that's what was going on. But he sticks to his plan. He doesn't go out of his way to hurt people that he's not compelled to. And then you get the other side of it where you have someone in Hannibal who seems completely in control and measured. And then he gets that little ounce of daylight. And the instant he senses weakness, he can't help himself. And he bites a dude's nose off and then cuts another guy's face off and wears it as a mask.
Yeah, just some crazy ass bullshit.
And like that's kind of where that movie for 5 minutes it drifts too far into the fantastical because Hannibal basically turns into Spider-Man for those 5 minutes.
Yeah, no fucking shit, like crazy detective type shit, Inspector Gadget level.
Yeah, and like Buffalo Bill's not doing any of that. Like
he's
just
a fucking weird dude in his basement.
Right, and to my knowledge, I haven't watched it in a while, but he's not really trying to kill Clarice. He's trying to get away from her when she gets into his house. But Clarice isn't part of his mission. Like, he just needs to get away from her so he can complete his mission. He doesn't necessarily, like, I think he had a gun, right?
Yes, 357.
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
Big fucking gun.
I don't know that we need Hannibal turning into Spider-Man for 5 minutes to understand this movie or make the movie good. Like,
will make him that much of like
I guess we
character.
needed to see the terror he could invoke in other people, but I feel like maybe there's better ways to do that than what was done.
That could have been left out completely, and it still would have been terrifying.
Here's me nitpicking Silence of the Lambs, one of the greatest movies of all time.
Exactly. You bastard.
Way to go. All right, so let's move the conversation. You said all you wanted to on movies, or did you have more?
I think I said all I wanted to.
So let's try and move back to fiction versus nonfiction. I think we've kind of hammered home the point. Just one more time, though, fiction, there's a bit of a disconnect with fictional tales from what they're like in the real world. They often fantasticize. That's not a word.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah, they embellish the
That's
world
a lot better.
and make things a little too outlandish often.
Oh, all the fucking time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would say literally fictional serial killers would outpace regular serial killers 100 out of 100 times.
Like a real serial killer's killed like 4 people, and in that amount of time, a TV serial killer would have killed 120.
Oh, exactly. And they would be, fucking a million different chicks and are popular and work at a police department.
Yeah. And often the fiction buries the compulsion or the psychological satisfaction the killer gets out of their kills to try and make the story more compelling in some way, whether it's adding more on top of the initial compulsion, or sometimes fiction will try to break the compulsion so the killer ends up going after the main character who doesn't necessarily fit in the bounds of the compulsion. Like, you've got a main detective on it, and now all of a sudden the killer only cares about killing the detective, even though the detective doesn't fit the rest of the killer's modus operandi, And
well, they have to, because they want to get caught, and
right.
And at the same time,
it's
don't
more
want to.
compelling TV if the main character's life is actually in danger, which
Absolutely.
Silence of the Lambs does a great job of that by, instead of having Buffalo Bill seek out Clarice, which would be completely out of character, she goes into his house alone in the dark, and that's why she's in danger.
Yeah, that shit was so good.
Should we talk some real world examples? Do you have any historical ones other than what we hit on the top?
No, I tried to find a third one. I had a third one in the back of my mind. I saw it on an episode of Unsolved Mysteries when I was a kid, and it scared the fuck out of me because it was
those random unsolved mysteries from when you were a kid, like, were the weirdest things in the world.
Oh man!
And you always have like vivid memories of them, but you have no idea what the mystery was.
Exactly.
I don't remember.
I
remember there
details.
was a reenactment with a train going through someone's house, and I believe John Lithgow was one of the reenactors.
Oh shit!
That's all I remember. I don't know what the mystery was or anything else going on around it, but it's like the weirdest thing.
That's money.
Yeah.
I remember the alien ones, and then this one where it was like a Iranian guy, I want to say. It was Middle Eastern, and they were like showing video of these like huts they found with like hundreds of outfits from children. And that, they found a ton of blood and like all kinds of instruments and crazy shit like that. And I remember that just being like the most frightening thing, the far end of the spectrum, in my opinion. That scared the shit out of me.
So I found 3 real world examples, and I thought it would be fun to think of how they would make the movies of these real world examples like too outlandish and do make the mistakes that we've been talking about. I'll try and fly through them here, since this was kind of an unplanned detour. The first is Harold Dr. Death Shipman. Great serial killer name right there.
Dr. Death.
218 credited murders, may have been as many as 250 between 1972 and 1998. He was a popular British physician. He's married, family man. Nobody suspects a thing, basically. He killed mostly elderly women. He left them fully clothed, sitting straight up, using lethal doses of diamorphine. So, he would go in their house to care for them, shoot them up with diamorphine, and then just leave them there for a family member to find, and then they call in the authorities. So he was caught. Actually, he would send most of them for cremation. So that's why it took so long to catch him, because there were no autopsies on him. But he was caught when the daughter of his final victim accused him of killing her mother, and this was the only victim whom he did not cremate. So an autopsy found the lethally high levels of diamorphine, so it was easy to kind of, put 2 and 2 together there, and then they traced him back to all these other people that he had killed, because he had signed an abnormally large number of cremation orders. And nobody picked up on it until this happened. And oh shit, yeah.
Yeah, this guy might be a not very nice man.
Yeah. So I thought if this were a movie, the daughter who ended up ratting him out would be the main character, and she would have had some personal connection to the doctor. She'd be dating him or something, right? And he would be trying to poison her also, but she'd be too smart for it and catch him. So that's the kind of stuff that movies add to this thing that you don't necessarily need to make it a good story.
Right. He'd be like the landlord. He's got a Victor. That'd be a good one. And yeah, she is broke and has diabetes or some shit, and she needs her medicine.
Right. And yeah. So the next one, Belle Lady Bluebeard, Guness. And this one sounds more like a scary story than an actual real serial killer. She killed over a dozen men between 1900 and 1908. Her first kill was her first husband. In 1900, their family store had been burned down and her husband was dead. They didn't happen at the same time, but they happened both within the year of 1900. And both happened under suspicious circumstances. So she then remarried and bought a farm in Indiana with her new husband. 8 months later, he was dead, again under very suspicious circumstances. So then she starts placing newspaper ads asking potential suitors to come meet her at her farm, see what she's got going on. She's kind of this rich lady now, owns the farm. Only one of those guys made it out alive. So almost a dozen people going to see her, holler at her, if you will. One makes it out alive. The one that did make it out, he reportedly woke up to see a sinister-looking Guness standing over him.
I've heard her story before.
Yeah.
I think on Lore.
Yeah.
With Aaron Mahnke, and yeah, she was like, "Yeah, I'm a rich widow. You should come
hit me
be
up,
my man." And
I got the
she would take all their shit. She melted down their bodies in the basement.
Oh, I didn't
see
crazy
that. Shit.
Yeah,
she's wild.
So in 1908, a fire devastated their farm, and amongst the wreckage, they found the bodies of her remaining children and the decapitated corpse of a woman. They could not prove that it was her body. It seemed to be smaller than she was, but deterioration, things like that, it could have been. They claimed it was hers, even though they couldn't really prove it was. And a search of the burned farm led to the discovery of almost a dozen bodies, including many of the suitors and several children. To me, if this were a movie, I think they would try and stick pretty close, because this is a pretty batshit crazy story to begin with. It's definitely a horror film. I think it's told from the point of view of the guy that got away, right? I think the only thing that they'd add here is he would have some connection to the first husband. That's why he's going to check her out. That's why he's answering the personal ad, because he remembers her from marrying the first husband. And then they'd probably throw in some mental health indicators for her as well. Past trauma, childhood, sexual abuse, something like that. To give her. Yeah. That was my take on make that into a movie. If anybody wants to make these movies, I'm here to write them too.
I mean, I'm there.
The last one I want to talk about is Jeffrey Dahmer. So Jeffrey Dahmer
Fucking Jeffrey Dahmer
is a name that I've always heard, but never really understood his story. Never knew, so that's kind of why I wanted to explore him a little bit. Apparently, he had 17 victims between 1978 and 1991. He would mostly kill young, non-white men. He would eat their body parts and practice necrophilia. A would-be victim escaped and led police to his house, where they discovered photographs of dismembered bodies, severed heads, and genitalia, several other men, and a tub full of acid he used to dispose of the bodies. Now, if you ask Jesse Pinkman, that is not a good idea. You don't do it in the tub.
Exactly. Yeah, because it'll melt through it.
Exactly. If this were a movie, I think it would definitely focus heavily on childhood trauma of some sort. Like that would be the reason that they would give to it. I think they would tell it from his point of view. They try and humanize him in some way or excuse his behavior, kind of like Monster does. It's kind of hard to do these sometimes because, again, I feel like these are already compelling stories to begin with, and they don't need any sensationalism, but Hollywood always has to add a few cherries on top of any story they're telling.
Oh, no doubt.
So I think they would try and tell that story kind of like they tell Monster, where it's like, well, this guy really did have a lot going on.
Yeah, he had a couple bad days, and
so he's fucking eating people
poor
now.
bastard. Yeah, he's just real hungry. He went without food one too many times as a kid, so he lives off human flesh.
All right, so let's settle up with the serial killers still out there, just to give everyone a good scare before we leave them for the day.
I mean,
did you find in your research, or who did you find in your research is still out there uncaught?
Well, I mean, they recently caught the Golden Gate.
I heard about it.
Yeah, that guy was pretty intense. I listened to a podcast where they featured some of his audio that he called and left a voicemail on this chick's phone, and it was one of the most chilling shit. Oh my god, it was fucking haunting.
People are weird, man.
Yeah, it was really uncomfortable, and I was at work when I was listening to it. I'm just like, I gotta get the fuck out of here. I'm surrounded by all these people. But there's really, I honestly could not find a whole lot. I found several articles that are possible serial killing, but they were all from, or possible serial killer on the loose. But I didn't really find a trail of evidence that suggested that they were still active or that that panned out.
Yeah, so that was kind of what I found of they're probably still out there, but it doesn't seem like they're active anymore. But they never actually found someone to pin all these killings on. The first one I wanted to talk about is the Long Island serial killer, or the Craigslist Ripper. He had 10 plus victims between 1996 and 2010. 8 female sex workers' bodies were found on Gilgo Beach. And along with one toddler believed to be the child of one of the female victims, and one cross-dressing male sex worker made up the 10 victims. They all used Craigslist to advertise their services, so it seemed like he was hiring them off Craigslist, killing them, and then burying them on this beach. Never,
that sounds like a bad
no one's
time.
ever been convicted.
Well, I mean, I wonder why they stopped in 2010.
Don't be a prostitute on Craigslist.
Seriously, it's illegal.
Yeah, that's the problem here. The other one was the Rainbow Maniac. This guy's from Brazil. I just like this name, so that's why I went with it.
The Rainbow Maniac? What the kind of double entendre bullshit is that?
So,
Jesus Christ.
He's from Brazil. I wanted to go outside the U.S. for this one. He killed 13 people over an 18-month span in 2007 2008, targeted gay men and transvestites, hence the rainbow. Execution-style killings with bullets to the head. They're all killed in the Patriots Park and dumped with their pants around their ankles. Again, no one ever arrested, but seems to have gone by the wayside at this point. You bring up an interesting question, why do these people stop? Is their compulsion fulfilled? Have they found better ways to kill and not get caught? Have they been arrested and we just don't know it? A lot of possibilities there.
Or the thrill's just gone.
The thrill's just gone. What do you think the number of serial killers, or the apparent number of serial killers, has gone down?
I think it's just too fucking hard, man. I honestly think the thrill has kind of lessened a little bit more. So it's in the 70s, 80s, 90s, before forensics and communication between precincts was really good, and it was so easy. I think they had a limited purview of, people watching them. Like
Right.
it was just so much easier, which I think added to the thrill of it.
Right.
Because it's
you
you're
get all
getting
that attention that you need. Like one of the things said that attention seeking is a mark of some of these people.
I'm sure that's a major
Right
contributing
now,
factor.
and like you said, everybody's collective consciousness is so short-lived right now that nobody gives a shit about anything after 10 minutes. You don't get that attention you're seeking from it, and like you said, it's becoming easier to catch and track potential serial killers with forensics, psychological profiling. Crowdsourcing is a big thing right now. The true crime community on the internet is huge and kind of loves to pull at these strings all day, whether they're real or not. They're still out
they
there
solve
doing
crimes and shit. Like,
Right.
what the fuck? Like, cold cases. That's crazy.
Yeah. And like facial recognition and other technology has become so abundant. Like there's cameras everywhere, security systems everywhere. We have this always connected lifestyle that makes it hard to not be seen doing something.
Right? And I think just about when you're in the realm of like murder and shit like that, like the compulsion aspect, like how rabid that compulsion is, I think, fuck, I lost my train of thought there. I think that, the risk reward factor is still prevalent. I mean, I think that still reigns supreme in that realm of such extremes. So it's something where I think now it's just too much of a risk. And even if that's a compulsion, you want to scratch, you have to scratch. You don't if you're gonna get caught, because you'll never get to scratch that compulsion again. You know what I mean? Or never
Right.
have the option of scratching that itch. It's never something you could work up to, blah, blah, blah. I think it's just too easy to get caught.
Right.
People are fucking suspicious of each other these days, man. It's, back in the day, it's like someone was out all night and they showed up with blood all over them. It's like, oh, he's, slaughtering the cows in the fields. Whatever.
Well, and especially if there's some sort of pattern to go along with their compulsion and tie these things together. Like detectives are now trained, and internet sleuths are being trained to look for connections in places where no one would have thought to look 20 years ago. Like people are pulling at strings that no one ever would have thought that those strings were connected in 1994, but now we're like, oh yeah, this thing does go with this thing. And detectives are being better trained for that. People on the internet, like people just in general, are kind of better at doing that nowadays. And I think another big factor in it, there's a bigger focus on mental health and mental health services, and there's more resources becoming available all of the time in most places. Fuck you, Florida.
Absolutely, dude. That's a great point, man. Great point.
It's getting easier to flag these tendencies in people earlier. They don't actually get to the point of acting on their compulsions because they have the resources they need early in their lives. So I kind of, just to sum it up, our methods for early detection and actually catching people are becoming more sophisticated. The serial killers can still exist, but it's getting harder, like you said, for them to have longevity that past serial killers did. Like the Golden State Killer is out there for like 40 years or something, right?
Well, he disappeared for a long time. Right around the 90s, I want to say.
Once people started having a focus on pulling at these different strings.
Well, people love strings. We're like cats. We just love them. Pull off
Beat
fucking
me to the
dead.
cat joke there.
Bam.
So do you think serial killers are going to become an extinct species?
Eventually. I think it'll be like, I don't know, the KKK.
Yeah, they're still out there. I don't know if you turned on the news lately. There are some very good people on both sides.
Kiss my ass. But what I'm saying is, like, back in the day, membership of the KKK was like in the millions. But now it's probably in, per state, like a couple hundred to a couple thousand. So I mean, it's dramatically cut down, and I think this is kind of a similar situation. Like, I think it's both passion projects driven by hate.
Passion projects.
Oh,
that's one way to put it.
It's what it seems like to me. It's like these people are passionate as shit about dumbass stuff.
Yes,
like,
that's very
a passion project. It's like, y'all are fucked up. But anyway, I think it's really curtailed off because it is something that is taboo. You know what I mean? And people want to spread that information because it's easily spread. It's like, damn, did you hear about fucking James? He killed some motherfucker. Like, shoot it off to 500 people as soon as you want.
Well, that, and when one person dies, everybody's all over it. For the most part.
I don't know about necessarily one person, But I think if there's any remote thread, like say they found 2 bodies within 5 miles of each other within the same night, guaranteed they're going to contribute them to the same person.
Right.
Like I think that's kind of where we're at. Whereas
or
back
at
in
the
day,
very least, start pulling strings, right? Pulling at
Exactly.
those strings that they think may be connected.
Exactly, 100%.
I don't think that they'll become completely extinct. I think, like you said, that number will diminish very rapidly.
But they'll always exist, I think.
Yeah, just like as our tools for catching serial killers get more sophisticated, I think the killer's tools for capturing and killing people will also become more sophisticated. Like there's always new ways to do stuff. Yeah, if you look at like computer hackers, when an exploit is first identified, a solution is launched to stop future attacks, but then hackers just find a new, different way to get in. There's always something to exploit. You're never going to make a completely secure system. Or like I like to think about it like the cyclist cheating scandals, Lance Armstrong and all those guys. The governing bodies had all kinds of ways to test for doping, but the cyclists always found new ways to beat the test. Whenever the technology for catching them grew, their technology for beating it also grew. Like they if you want to beat the system, you're always going to find a way to.
That's human beings for you.
And if serial killers have that type of compulsion where they need to do what they need to do, they're probably also the type of people who can think of ways to get around things that would stop them.
Right,
They have time to sit there and think about it.
Even if they don't have time, they're sneaky little bastards.
Whew, serial killers, man.
Yeah, that was a trip.
We didn't even
I'm
get
glad
into
we didn't.
Cheerios at all.
I mean, shit. I mean, I guess you could call cereal a serial killer because it's probably giving a lot of people lethal diabetes.
Not Cheerios. It's good for your heart.
So they say Honey Nut Cheerios are full of sugar.
Honey Nut Cheerios are so good, though.
Fucking right, dude. Especially with a little dab of extra honey.
Yep, that's the way to do it.
I'm saying.
You got anything else on actual serial killers?
I don't.
Me neither.
I don't have anything else on actual serial killers. I'm glad we didn't dive too deep into the details. I know some people are really big fans of that, but
I'd rather explore it as a whole than like go super deep on one person and get really depressed for an hour.
Agreed.
And
100%.
however long I was looking into that person, I'd also be depressed. So yeah, it's
right. So
for me, it's much more mentally healthy to stay surface level on this and to look at fictional versions of this.
100%.
So that's why we did it. So if you were here looking for a hard-boiled detective story about how we're going to catch a serial killer, I think you figured it out by now. You came to the wrong place. But hopefully you learned something.
Yeah, I hope it was a breath of fresh air and you enjoyed it a little bit.
Follow us on Twitter at APA something at alone_podcast. Leave us a review on iTunes or Podchaser. You can review there, or Castbox. You can review there. If you're listening to this on a platform that allows reviews, leave us a review.
Yeah, we appreciate it so much.
Not that hard. What are you doing right now? You're in quarantine. You got nothing better to do.
Yeah, and it's free. It's a free thing to help us out. We appreciate it.
Good point. All right. Thank you for listening. Thanks always to those cats who provide all the music for a podcast about something. I forgot the name of our podcast for a second. That was rough.
You guys stay sassy.
Stay classy.